Hello there and welcome to the Double Zero Challenge channel. We do just one thing on this channel. We take these two D10 dice and see how long it takes before we roll a double zero. If you'd like to play along, please write down your guess now. However, keep it to yourself. Don't disclose it in the comments. Let other people watch the video and guess for themselves. There'll be other things to explain as we go along, but let's get on with those rolls. So, roll number 1, and we have a 9 and a 4. I'll read them all out as we go along. And that's a 5 and a 1. And that's a 1 and a 9. It's a 3 and an 8. Oops. And we have a 6 and an 8. That's a 0, but it's an 8. Remember, we're only looking for a double zero. We will take account of any other doubles just to track our progress as well. And we've got a 0, but a 7. We've got a 0, but a 2. And that's a 2 and a 3. 4 and a 7. And that's a 2 and a 9. And we have a 2 and a 3. And that's a 5 and a 3. It's a 0, but it's a 2. And we have a 7 and a 5. And that's a 3 and a 6. And we have a 9 and a 2. And that's a 0, but it's a 5. And we have a 2 and a 7. And we have a 0, but we have an 8. We have yet another 0, but it's a 1. Close, but not close enough. And we have a 0, but a 4. A nice long spin this time. And that is a 6 and a 6. So we'll have the first double of the session. We're going to track them down there. Statistically, there should be 9 other doubles on the way to the hypothetical odds of 1 in 100 to roll a double zero. Or indeed, 1 in 10 to roll any double. But maths aside, we move on. 1 and 4. And that is a 9 and a 9. I know it's got a little line, but sometimes it's a little hard to mentally rotate it. So that's what I've done. Doesn't make a difference anyway, apart from putting another double onto the sheet. And that's a 0, but it's a 9. That's a 2 and a 1. And that's a 0, but it's a 9. And that is a double 7. And it's a 0, but it's a 2. And that's a 5 and a 1. And that's a 2 and an 8. And a 2 and a 5. Oh, there we go. It's a 0, but an 8. If you watch this channel, you'll know any mistakes tend to get left in. There is minimal editing here. In any case, it's not a crucial throw. And that is an 8 and a 9. Sorry, that is an 8 and a 6. Again, not a crucial throw. And again, my mental rotation has just been lost today. But we carry on regardless. That is a 3 and a 6. And that is a 9 and a 6. And it's a 2 and a 3. 7 and 4. And that's a 5 and a 7. There we go, jumping away again. We have a 9 and a 3. And that's a 2 and a 7. And we have a 2 and an 8. And that's a 3 and a 5. And we have an 8 and a 5. Every time we get to 50, we're going to do a massive double-hander roll like that. So that'll be coming up in just a few rolls' time. But first, 7 and 8. And that's a 0, but it's a 3. It's a 0, but it's a 4. 7 and 2, and the 50th massive roll. We have a 2 and a 6, so we play on for 100 rolls. And that is a 9 and a 6. And we have a 6 and a 9. 7 and 2. And we have a 0, but we have a 6. And that's a 7 and a 6. And we have a 0, but we have a 7. That's a 3 and a 7. And a 3 and a 5. It's a 5 and a 9. It's a 0, but it's a 6. And that is a 4 and a 6. It's a double 5. First double for a while in the session. 7 and an 8. And that's a 1 and a 6. 3 and an 8. And it's a 0, but it's a 5. We have a 5 and a 9. And that's a 6 and a 9. 5 and an 8. And we have a 9 and a 4. That is a 9 and an 8. And a double 7, our 5th double of the session. 9 and a 4. And that is a 0, but also a 6. An 8 and a 2. And that's a 7 and a 5. We have a 0, but we have a 3. That's a 1 and a 5. And a double 5. It's a 5 and a 3. And it's a 0, but it's a 3. And that says an 8 and a 4. And a 5 and a 9. This pen is not writing straight. And that is a 5 and a 6. And we have a 3 and a 2. And that is a double 1. And that's a 6 and an 8. It's a 5 and a 6. And we have a 4 and a 2. And a 1 and an 8. An 8 and a 9. That's a 0, but it's a 2. A 3 and a 5. A 9 and a 1. And we have a 3 and a 2. Very shortly, it's another double-handed roll because we're coming up to 100. But first, 5 and an 8. And that's a 4 and a 5. We have a 6 and a 3. And that's a 5 and a 3. And for 100, it is a 6 and a 9. So not a double, so we play on for 150 rolls. And that is a 7 and a 9. That's a 4 and a 2. We have a 5 and a 3. A 9 and a 2. It's a 0, but it's an 8. 3 and a 4. And that's a 2 and a 9. We have a 0, but we have a 5. It's a 3 and a 4. And that's a 1 and a 3. 5 and a 6. And that's a 7 and a 2. We have a 9 and a 3. And that is a double 7, our 8th double of the session so far. Statistically not keeping pace with the rolls, but hypothetical circumstances and all that. 4 and a 3, slightly off kilter 4, but it doesn't matter. We have a 3 and a 7. And that's a 1 and a 9. A 0, but a 5. That's a 1 and a 4. And that is a 9 and a 1. We have a 0, but we have a 5. That's a 7 and a 1. And an 8 and a 7. That's a 9 and an 8. And we have a 1 and a 6. That's a 1 and a 2. We have a 0, but we have a 2. It's a 0 and a 2. And just for variety, an 8 and a 2. Here we have a 4 and an 8. That's a 6 and a 3. And we have a 6 and a 5. We have a 9 and a 9. And that becomes our ninth double. It is a 6 and a 3. And we have a 6 and a 2. That's an 8 and a 4. And that's a 4 and a 6. We have a 1 and a 3. We have a 0, but we have a 2. That is a double 3, bringing us up to 10. And that is a 9 and a 9. So another double. It's a 0, but it's a 6. That's an 8 and a 3. And a 7 and a 2. And that's a 2 and a 4. And as we're coming up to a multiple of 50, we're going to have the big shake in just a second. And that is an 8 and a 3. It's a 0, but it's a 9. And that's a 7 and a 9. It's a 0, but it's a 5. And for 150, we have a 6 and a 9. So we move on for 200 rolls. It's an 8 and a 6. And we have a double 1, becoming our 12th double of the session, but not the double we're after. And we have a 6 and a 4. Two and a 6. That's a 3 and a 6. 1 and a 7. And that's a 2 and a 4. And 2 and a 9. A 1 and a 6. And that's a 4 and an 8. 2 and a 4. And a 5 and a 9. And it's a 0, but it's a 5. It's a 2 and an 8. 4 and a 1. And that's a 7 and a 4. And we have a 2 and a 5. That's a 3 and a 1. And a 4 and a 6. It's a 4 and a 1. And we have an 8 and a 9. It's a 5 and a 6. And we have a 2 and a 7. 7 and a 3. And that is a 7 and a 6. It's a 0, but it's a 6. It's a 0, but it's a 4. It's a 0, but it's Groundhog Day. I'm sorry, I mean a 9. It's a 7 and a 2. And we have a 2 and a 1. We have a 0, but it's a 7. 6 and a 4. And we have a 0, but it's paired with a 9. It's a 0, but an 8. It's a double 8 this time. Sling that on the doubles pile. And it's a 3 and a 6. And we have a 9 and a 9 there. Great stuff, so another double. It's a 0, but it's a 3. It's a 0, but it's a 4. A 5 and an 8. Double 7. And we have a 5 and a 1. And that's a 7 and a 3. We have an 8 and a 4. And a 2 and a 9. Remember, the double hander is coming up in just a moment for the 200th roll. A 7 and a 3. And that's a 0, but it's a 7. And we have a 4 and a 5. And that's a 3 and a 5. Oops. Never mind, I meant to do the double hander there. That is a 5 and a 6, so we'll just count that. We'll do it for the 201st instead. We don't normally get up this far, so my concentration is gone with this. Big shake and 9 and a 6. Yeah, so we'll carry on for 250 rolls. And that's a 0, but it's a 1. Close, but no safer cigar substitute. And we have a 1 and a 9. We have a 0, but we have an 8. And that's an 8 and a 9. And that's a 1 and a 9. Three and an 8. And that's a 1 and a 7. We have a 2 and a 5. And that's a 3 and a 9. It's a 0, but it's a 3. It's a 0, but it's a 5. And that's a 1 and a 7. And that's a 0, but it's a 3. That's a 0, but it's a 5. We have a 2 and a 4. And that's a 4 and a 9. And that's a 4 and a 5. That's a 2 and a 4. And a 2 and a 4. And a 3 and a 4. And we have a 9 and a 5. 7 and 5. And that's a 7 and a 9. We have a 3 and a 7. That's a 0, but it's a 6. And that's a 7 and a 4. And we have a 4 and a 7. And we have a 2 and a 4. And that is a 9 and a 1. And we have an 8 and a 4. We have a 2 and a 4. A lot of 2s and 4s at the moment. A 1 and a 5. And that's a 2 and an 8. A 3 and a 2. And that is an escape dice. It's a 0 on the ground. And it's a 1 on the table. Lovely jubbly. Let me just walk around all my equipment, try not to trip over any wires. There's a 0 there, and I'm just going to knit back as well. I know it looks nice and tidy on the surface, but there are wires everywhere behind the scenes. But we carry on. And that's a 2 and a 6. And that is an 8 and a 6. And we have a 9 and a 5. 9 to 5. That's a 2 and a 4. Again. A 2 and a 9. And that is a 2 and a 6. It is a 9 and a 9, so that is a double 9, taking us up to 16 doubles. Again, not many doubles, statistically fewer than you'd expect for nearly 250 rolls. 0, but it's a 2. And of course, when we get to 250, we'll have the double hander again. That'll be in just a moment. But first, 4 and a 9. And we have a 6 and a 3. 7 and a 9. It's a 0, but it's a 5. And that is a double 6. Stick it there, stick it down there. And for the two-hander, it's a 3 and a 4. So we carry on for 300 rolls. That is a 1 and a 6. And that's a 7 and a 5. And we have an 8 and a 9. That's a double 5. And we have a double 2. Double 5 bringing us up to 20 doubles from 250 rolls or thereabouts. A 7 and a 5. And we have a 0, but we have an 8. That's a 2 and an 8. 2 and a 7. And that's a 7 and a 3. And we have a 3 and a 6. And that's a 7 and an 8. 3 and a 5. And that's a 3 and a 6. It's a 0, but it's a 3. And we have a 3 and a 4. And that's an 8 and a 3. We have a 0, but we have a 4. It is a 7 and a 2. And we have a 5 and an 8. That's a 2 and a 4. And a 0, but a 3. That's a double 7. Coming out 21st double. 3 times 7, of course. And that's a 3 and a 9. 3 and a 5. And that's an 8 and a 4. We have a 2 and a 5. And that's a 6 and a 5. A 3 and an 8. Oops. Another jump. A 3 and a 7. And that's an 8 and a 2. It's a double 3. 22. 2 little lucks. I have to remember I'm not calling bingo numbers. 5 and 9, the Brighton line. Yeah. Mental note, stop that. We carry on. It's a 0, but it's a 4. It's a double 2. Ironically, it does not land on the 22. And that's a 7 and a 4 with a mischievous dice. And we have a 1 and a 9. And it's a 7 and a 9. It's a double 3. 24. 8 times 3, of course. And it's a 7 and a 5. We have a 1 and a 7. And that's a 4 and a 7. A 2 and a 9. And that's a 1 and a 2. We've got a double hander coming up shortly. But first, it's a 4 and a 7. And we have a 7 and an 8. Oh, for goodness sake, just behave. A 3 and a 5. Of course, telling these dice to behave is a useless exercise. 1 and a 5, especially when the dice gods are not smiling upon us. But for roll 300, it's a 0, but it's a 6. So we carry on for roll 350. And that is a 6 and a 9 there. It's a 6 and a 1. And that's a 0, but it's a 7. It's a 0, but it's a 2. And that's a 3 and a 9. And it's a 0, but it's a 9. Seven and 2. It's a 0, but it's a 9. And that's an 8 and a 4. And that's a 0, but it's a 7. We have a 1 and a 9. And we have a 7 and a 1. It's a 2 and a 9. And it's a 0, but it's an 8. It's an 8 and a 3. It's a 1 and a 6. Oops. And we have a 2 and a 9. That is a 4 and a 9. And that's an 8 and a 2. It's a 7 and a 6. And we have a 7 and a 4. That is a double 7, taking us up to 25 doubles altogether. And it's a 1 and a 3. We have a 7 and a 1. and that's a 1 and a 9. It's a 0, but it's a 9. It's a 6 and a 2, and that's a 5 and an 8, and that's a 7 and a 5. And we have, at long last, a double 0. So 300, that is 330 rolls for the double 0, and 25 doubles. Oh, Bajamo. I can't check right now whether this is the longest video or not, but I suspect it is one of the longest videos so far. In fact, I was mentally working out what to do once we get past 450, so I probably would have just carried on underneath. Anyway, after about 40 minutes, thank you so much for watching this video. You take care and roll on next time.